On December 17, 2022, veterinary pathologists at the San Diego Zoo Safari Park opened up the most famous mountain lion in America. In his liver, they found 5 different rat poisons. In his body fat, they found a 6th chemical from a completely different class. And then, in the official record, they wrote that there was no evidence he had been poisoned. Both of those things are true at the same time, but the gap between what was inside P22 and what the paperwork says killed him is where this entire story lives. The 5 in his liver were difecinone, chlorofecinone, brodifacoum, bromadiolone, and difethialone. 2 of them older compounds, 3 of them the newer generation that kills faster and lingers longer. The 6th, the one in his fat, was desmethylbromethylene. That is what a body turns bromethylene into, and bromethylene is a neurotoxin that goes after the brain and the spinal cord. The National Park Service said it most likely reached him through something he ate. Nobody can name the meal. Nobody can name the block it started on. It was simply in him, stored in the fat of a 120-pound cat that spent his whole adult life inside 8 square miles of chaparral and eucalyptus above the Hollywood sign. And it was not the first time he had tested positive. In late March of 2014, National Park Service biologists tranquilized P22 in Griffith Park to change the battery in his GPS collar. They found a cat with his coat coming out in patches, the skin around his eyes and ears crusted and thickened, the classic look of notoedric mange. They treated him with a topical drug and let him go. His blood work came back a couple of weeks later, and it showed difecinone and chlorofecinone, rat poison, circulating in a mountain lion whose main prey is mule deer. The Park Service already had a file on this. By 2014, biologists working with a UCLA graduate student had tested 140 bobcats, coyotes, and mountain lions in and around the Santa Monica Mountains. 88% of them came back positive for 1 or more anticoagulant compounds. Mange in wildcats is supposed to be rare, and in the 12 years of the mountain lion study up to that point, only 2 other lions had developed it. Both of those cats died of rodenticide poisoning. So the question underneath all of this is not whether the poison gets into them. That was settled a decade ago. The question is what it does to the ones it doesn't kill, and the answer took 20 years to show up, in a place nobody thinks to look for damage from a pest control product. It starts with a plastic bait station bolted to the back wall of a restaurant in the San Fernando Valley. A roof rat feeds on the block inside it, and anticoagulant rodenticide does not work quickly. The rat comes back for 2, 3, 4 nights, and the dose builds in its liver, and the animal stays alive the whole time, getting slower and clumsier and easier to catch. That delay is the whole reason any of this reaches a mountain lion. A rat that died at the bait station would take the poison with it. A rat that wanders out into the alley for 4 days carries it into the neighborhood in a body that is now easy to run down. So the poison walks out of the bait station on its own legs. A gray fox takes one, then another. A coyote works a row of dumpsters and takes several in a week. A great horned owl lifts one off a lawn below Griffith Observatory. Every one of those animals becomes a container holding a dose in its liver that can sit there for months. Brodifacoum, one of the 5 compounds in P22, can have a half-life in liver tissue of roughly 350 days. Seth Riley, the urban wildlife expert at Santa Monica Mountains National Recreation Area, described the mechanism plainly in 2014. Anticoagulant rodenticides, he said, are designed to kill rodents by thinning the blood and preventing clotting. When people put these bait traps outside their homes or businesses, he went on, they may not realize that the poison works its way up the food chain, becoming more lethal as the dose accumulates in larger animals. The usual version of the story stops right there. Poison goes up the chain, predators die, ban the poison. That version is on every flyer, and California's own laboratory data does not support it. The California Department of Fish and Wildlife runs a laboratory that receives dead wildlife from across the state. Wardens bring animals in. Rehabilitation centers bring them in. Somebody finds a body on a fire road above Malibu and makes a phone call. The lab performs the necropsy and sends liver tissue to the Animal Health Laboratory at Davis for toxicology. And every year, it publishes what it found in a report almost nobody outside the agency opens. In 2024, that lab tested 41 mountain lions for anticoagulant exposure. 39 came back positive, 95%. The number of those lions in which the laboratory could confirm the poison actually killed the animal was 0. That shape repeats every year. In 2022, the same lab tested 38 bobcats and found poison in 33 of them. It tested 19 mountain lions and found it in 17. Gray foxes came in at 12 of 13, coyotes at 6 of 6. Across every non-game mammal screened that year, 86 animals were positive, and exactly one, a coyote from Santa Clara County, was confirmed dead of rodenticide toxicosis, 1 out of 86. An adult female bobcat from Orange County was carrying 6 different compounds in her liver at once, and she was not counted as a poisoning either. 3 more animals were listed as suspected poisonings the lab could not rule in or out because the bodies had decomposed too far to read. One of them was a mountain lion cub that died at the end of October, carrying 3 second-generation compounds and 1 first-generation compound in a body that had not been alive very long. Almost half of the animals the lab screened that year were carrying 3 or more different compounds at the same time. Those are separate doses from separate products, picked up in different places over the course of one animal's life. Nearly every animal that gets tested comes back positive, and almost none of those deaths are ever written down as poisonings. And there's a reason for that, buried in the methods section of the same report, which is the least dramatic paragraph in this entire video and the most important one. There is no universal threshold. No concentration exists at which a laboratory can say this animal was poisoned. So to call a death rodenticide toxicosis, the pathologist needs bleeding, and the bleeding has to have no other identifiable cause. Trauma disqualifies it. Disease disqualifies it. Infection disqualifies it. Which means a bobcat full of anticoagulant that gets hit by a car and bleeds out on the shoulder of a county road goes into the record as a vehicle strike. A mountain lion carrying 5 compounds who dies with an infection and a failing kidney goes in as an infection and a failing kidney. The laboratory knows exactly what that leaves out and says so in the same report. Exposure in the absence of toxicosis, it writes, should not be ignored, and the uncertainty around chronic and sublethal exposure is precisely why the monitoring has to continue. The diagnostic bar is written in a way that the sublethal cases can never clear. Whatever the poison is doing to these animals, it's doing it in a column nobody is allowed to write in, and the receipt shows up years later in a place nobody was watching. Now the fair objection, because it deserves a straight answer. If 95% of California's tested mountain lions carry this stuff and almost none of them die of it, maybe that's the whole story. Maybe it's contamination, unpleasant but survivable, the wildlife version of lead in old paint. Cats are more resistant to anticoagulants than dogs or birds are. Maybe the big ones are simply built to shrug it off. The state answers that objection in one sentence in its own report. Exposure to anticoagulant rodenticides, the laboratory writes, may predispose wildlife to excessive hemorrhage following an otherwise non-lethal traumatic injury. The poison doesn't have to open the wound. It just has to be in the animal on the day that something else does. There's a place where that stopped being a theory, and it's the range of hills between Los Angeles and the Pacific. In 2002, biologists monitoring bobcats in the Santa Monica Mountains started catching animals that looked wrong. Fur thinning around the eyes and ears, skin thickened into a gray crust, cats losing weight fast, hunting badly in daylight, dying under decks and inside culverts. The cause was Notoedric mange, a burrowing mite. In a healthy bobcat, it's a nuisance. This outbreak was not a nuisance. It ran 3 years. In 2003, at its worst, Mange killed 51% of the monitored bobcats in that population. Annual survival for radio-collared animals fell by more than half. Within a couple of seasons, a skin mite that biologists had barely bothered to track became the largest single source of death in those hills. Laurel Ceres, then a doctoral researcher at UCLA working alongside the Park Service, went looking for the reason. She tested the dead and the living, and what she found in the mange cats was rodenticide, over and over, frequently at concentrations well below anything that would cause visible internal bleeding. Across her sampling, 89% of the bobcats tested had residues in the liver. Where she had both liver and blood from the same animal, 92% were exposed, and most of them to 3 or more compounds at once. The heaviest contamination tracked human development, commercial, residential, and agricultural. The association with disease held up statistically. Bobcats carrying 2 or more compounds, or a liver concentration at or above a quarter part per million, were strongly associated with severe mange. The immune measurements pointed the same direction. Exposed bobcats had elevated lymphocyte counts, elevated B cells, and a lower percentage of neutrophils. Their immune systems were reading as disturbed, some counts pushed up and others pulled down, in animals whose skin was being eaten alive by something a healthy bobcat fights off. Nobody has proven, animal by animal, that the poison caused any single one of those deaths, and the honest version of this story doesn't claim otherwise. Not enough to confirm, not enough to dismiss. But the shape is hard to argue with. A mite that bobcats normally survive killed half of them in exactly the years when almost every one of those bobcats was carrying multiple rat poisons. Then the outbreak burned out, the survivors bred, and the real cost finally surfaced. Ceres compared the DNA of that bobcat population before the outbreak and after it, using more than 300 animals sampled between 1996 and 2012. The two groups had separated genetically. Any bottleneck does that. What made the finding land was the comparison she could draw against the other thing carving up those hills. The genetic difference between the bobcats before the disease and the bobcats after it was greater than the difference between bobcat populations split apart by major freeways for more than 60 years. 3 years of a mange outbreak did more to those cats' genetics than 60 years of the 101 and the 405. And the freeways were not a small thing to beat. The same work identified 2 freeways as significant barriers to gene flow for those bobcats, with the 101 acting as more than a wall of traffic. Cats on either side were behaving like separate societies. That's what the poison outran in 3 summers. There was one piece of good news inside it. Selection appeared to hold variation open at the immune-linked regions of the genome, protecting the very diversity the population would need the next time something like this came through. The cats that walked out of that outbreak were chosen by it. What came out the other side was a smaller, narrower population. In a set of hills, it has no way to leave. If you've got a tree line behind your house, this is the part worth carrying outside with you. Tell me in the comments what you've seen where you live, the state and the animal, and especially if you've watched a bobcat go patchy and bald in your county, because the mountain lions in those same hills are running down a different clock. In 2019, a team led by John Benson published a population viability analysis of the mountain lions in the Santa Monica Mountains and the Santa Ana Mountains, the two isolated populations in Southern California. The modeling was blunt. If inbreeding depression sets in, the Santa Monica population carries a 99.7% probability of local extinction within 50 years, with a median time to extinction of about 15, not from hunting and not from poison directly, from the arithmetic of an island with no new arrivals. P22 is the clearest illustration of that arithmetic anyone will ever get. He was born in the Santa Monica Mountains, the son of an adult male the Park Service had designated P1. As a young cat, he crossed the 405 and then the 101, two of the busiest freeways on the planet, and he came out the other side in Griffith Park. Biologists first caught and collared him there in March of 2012, when they put his age at about 2. He held the smallest home range ever recorded for an adult male mountain lion, and he held it for more than a decade, one of the most senior animals in the entire Park Service study. In all that time, he never found a female. He never produced a single offspring. His genetics ended inside that park. So when the pathologists opened him up in December of 2022, they were reading the last page of a very specific experiment. The file is grim. He had been struck by a vehicle the night before biologists captured him, with a fractured eye socket and fresh bleeding behind it. He had an older injury too, a ruptured diaphragm, with his liver and abdominal tissue pushed up into his chest cavity, healed enough to prove he had been living that way for a while. He was underweight and arthritic. He had progressive, incurable kidney disease. His whole body was covered in a severe parasitic skin infection, this time demodectic mange, together with a systemic ringworm fungus. That combination had never been documented in a California mountain lion before. The 5 anticoagulants sit in that report as exposure, not as cause. Defacinone also turned up in his blood at capture, which suggests he had eaten something poisoned recently, 8 years after they first found it there. A separate state study of 247 mountain lions found 96% of them exposed to one or more of these compounds. Over 19 years, at least 7 Southern California mountain lions have been confirmed dead from rodenticide itself. 7 confirmed deaths against hundreds of contaminated cats, and everything in between filed under something else. California did act, and the laws are real. Assembly Bill 1788 was signed in September of 2020 and took effect on the first day of 2021, suspending most public and commercial use of second-generation anticoagulants. Assembly Bill 1322 added defacinone. In September of 2024, the governor signed Assembly Bill 2552, which pulled the last of the first-generation compounds into the moratorium starting in January of 2025. On paper, that's the strongest set of rat poison restrictions in the country. The state built itself a way to check whether any of it was working, because these compounds sit in the liver for months. An adult tested today can be carrying poison. It 8 years ago, so the department proposed watching the animals born after the first ban took effect. Anything born into a state where the products were no longer generally sold should be coming back clean. Then you rid the exemptions. The moratorium still allows rodenticide use to protect agriculture, water supplies, and public health. And in a state this size, that is a very wide door. The laboratory data shows the door standing open. In the 2022 report, the state lists animals born after the ban took effect that were already carrying poison. A mountain lion cub from Orange County, with 2 second-generation compounds and 2 first-generation. A cub from Sonoma County, a bobcat yearling from Placer County with 3 second-generation compounds in her liver. Animals that were not alive when those products were freely sold, testing positive anyway. The 2024 report puts it directly, saying the exposures it recorded most likely came from use after the ban was implemented. It reaches them earlier than that too. Researchers at California Fish and Wildlife, working with the Animal Health Laboratory at Davis, documented brotificum and diphacinone in the fetal tissue of a pregnant mountain lion in this state. Some of these cats are exposed before they are born. That much people were braced for. The last part is the one almost nobody has caught up to. Every number in this video comes from an anticoagulant screen. The laboratory takes liver tissue and looks for one specific family of blood-thinning compounds. Bromethalin is not in that family. It's a neurotoxin. It targets the brain and the central nervous system, and the National Park Service lists what that looks like in an animal that gets enough of it. Muscle tremors, seizures, paralysis of the hind limbs, then of the lungs, then death. It does not appear on the liver panel that produced the 95% figure. To find it, the lab has to test fat or brain tissue on purpose. In a separate test, somebody has to think to request. When California went looking, it found it. In 2022, 6 of the 17 mountain lions screened for bromethalin came back exposed, and 4 of the bobcats. That same year, the compound killed a young black bear in Kern County that had been seen circling and stumbling, uncoordinated on its feet, and turned up dead with damage visible in the white matter of its brain and along the nerve roots of its spine. In 2024, 22 of the 84 non-game mammals tested came back positive, and the state wrote down in its own annual report the sentence that belongs at the center of this whole argument. Legislation enacted to reduce the harm of anticoagulants, it says, may unintentionally result in widespread use of alternatives such as bromethalin, and the ecological risk assessments for that compound in wild species remain data deficient. It took 20 years of testing to build the case against the first poison. Nobody has really started that work on the second one, and it was already sitting in the body fat of a mountain lion above Los Angeles in December of 2022 in a park with a freeway on every side, in an animal that never ate any of it on purpose. If you want to see what happens to a big predator that does make it back on its own, watch what's waiting for the jaguars walking north into Arizona and what we've built across the only way in.